Hello to my air signs. Now, before you go anywhere, I've got something to say. It's a little bit of a group pep talk, a bit of group astrology, separate to maybe some of the other versions of the horoscopes. You can skip to your rising sign down below if you're not interested, but hear me out. So this is the horoscopes for the full moon in Sagittarius. It's happening on June the 4th, and it has with it a really great relationship and a great stimulation from a particular asteroid. Now, the sky's fairly clear-ish at this time. There's no major sort of aspects or difficulty going on up there, but there's a great deal of support from an asteroid called Pallas Athena. So the moon's at 13 degrees of Sagittarius, and Pallas Athena is at 13 degrees of Leo. That's fire to fire, and on the basis of my fire sign readings, it's packing a punch. I had a great reading last week with someone called Kirstine, who's an incredible new friend of mine now, and in the follow-up to our reading, she posted this beautiful image of Medusa and a new version of the mythology written by someone called Nikita Gill from a book called The Great Goddesses, which I haven't read yet and I can't wait to get myself a copy of. The mythology of Medusa is that Athena cursed her with the snakes and with the steely gaze because Poseidon or Neptune had taken advantage of her. And in Nikita's retelling of the story, it's an act of sisterhood. It's an act of protection. And I'm going to read to you from the excerpt that Kirstine posted from the book. I'll make you a trade. Your beauty for stone. Your sea-beloved tresses for venom-filled snakes. Your innocent doe eyes for frigid gaze. The sea is in the habit of ravishing what does not belong to him, taking without consideration. But, sweet girl, I promise you I will not allow this to be your ruin. You are sacred, one of my own. And no cruel chaos will devour you again. Choose terror over maiden. Relinquish your human. And I will turn you into a goddess in your own right, a deity of monsters, a myth that will scare men for all the years and their seasons. Pretty powerful when you put it like that. Athena was protecting, in the best way that she knew how, her sister from further harm by putting a mantle of the monster on her. Now, I'm wearing my own mantle of the monster right now. I don't know if you can hear it, but I haven't worn this leather jacket for about 3 years. I wore it for about 15 years. It was something that I would put on to get myself to a gig. I used to be a showgirl back in the day. I was performing here, there, and everywhere on every bar top that would have me in my underpants. But to get there and to get home, I'd put this jacket on. It still smells like hairspray. And here is a lino cut that I made of Medusa when I was 14. Now, I didn't know so much about the significations of the myth then, but I'm really glad I held on to this thing because it has so much value to me now. The idea of a young person like me identifying with the monster, it's pretty pertinent. Kids remember what you say about them. They absorb every reaction, especially the ones that are sensitive and that are free enough to be themselves. When met with oppression or violence, they take it on and they store it away. And then as they get older, they find ways to protect themselves. They find ways to rebuff anything that smells like that. And so at this time when Pallas Athena is in trine with this moon, we're working on a double-edged sword here. We've got a lot of great stuff to talk about Sagittarius, the sign of the philosopher, the sign that seeks and wishes to learn, wishes to know. And we've got a lot of conversation to have with Athena. And I think at this time, in this space, she's come to me to say I was doing my best. I was trying my hardest to survive and to protect you. So with that, you can skip down below into your timestamps. I am holding a ritual on Zoom for this full moon on the 4th. So if you wanted to head to umaruby.com, you can book yourself a spot at that ritual. I'll be telling some more stories and I'll be reading some tarot for us as a group, and we'll be having a conversation about where we've come from and where we hope to go. It does cost $50, but there is a discount code that works for all of my work in perpetuity, no questions asked. If ever you wanted a reading from me and money's tight, put in 6 of Pentacles in the coupon code and that'll sort you out. I'll see you in your reading. Thanks for hearing me out, my lovely air signs. Hello Libra rising, welcome to your horoscope for the Sagittarius full moon happening on Sunday the 4th of June at 1:43 p.m. if you're in the southern hemisphere with me. So this one is feeling pretty emotional, and if there's a feeling that you might have at the moment where you're feeling a bit wrung out, you're a bit exhausted, you don't know how much further you can go with how little there is left in the tank, I want to let you know that that's all right, and that it could be something that we can work with when we do our planet rituals together. So the tarot card for 13 degrees of Sagittarius, where this moon will play out, is the 9 of Wands. And this is the card of the wounded warrior. This is the card of someone who is up against it and who has been working overtime to get something over the line, who doesn't know if they have the stuff but is still standing. Their head is bandaged, but they are remaining stoic. They're not going anywhere. So I want you to sort of maybe bring some of that home with you, that sort of feeling that right now things are feeling really tense. Things are feeling really regressive, and it's exhausting to continue to try and show up and to be positive and to shine bright and to keep going. So I'm with you on that, Libra. And let's have a look at some of the other configurations, because there might be some nice stuff in there for you. This full moon is lighting up your 3rd house, which in Hellenistic astrology, one of the most ancient forms, the classic Greek, is the house of the goddess. So in that idea alone, we can look to Pallas Athena at this time for guidance. We can really feel her encouragement, feel what she was trying to do. She's trying to protect, trying to save her sister Medusa. So Leo for you, Libra, is your 11th house, which is your sense of humanity and community. I like this. I think at this full moon, there's going to be a real upswell in the coven, holding hands, gathering together, and including everyone that needs support. Language evolves, doesn't it? As evolved human beings, we learn that language if we're unsure. We develop our sense of consciousness in a spiritual way, but we develop our sense of social responsibility, and we recognize the continual violence and continual disregard of certain groups of people in this life through no fault of their own, that have been subjugated, and we support them in their weak spots. We support them where they can't support themselves. The third house, the house of the goddess, the house of folk magic, the house of your local environment, your village. In your village, what do you stand for? And who do you stand up for in that locale? If Pallas Athena is in your greater sense of humanity, the greater group, the human species itself, and is standing there in her armor, her protection, doing the best that she can to protect, the best that she knew how, what kind of energy can you channel? What kind of strength can you channel? And how can that manifest in your lived experience, in your village? Is there people in your neighborhood that need support from you? Is there, and support can take all sorts of different guises, can't it? And I understand that there's definitely a need to self-preserve and self-protect. But Pallas is in your 11th house, which is about the human experience. And so whatever gesture it is that you're feeling compelled to do, whatever's coming to your mind where you're sort of thinking, well, I have my own vulnerability. I have my own concerns, my own needs, my own traumas, my own background, my own triggers. And that's completely understandable, Libra. You don't have to put yourself on the front lines, you don't have to put yourself in danger to support and stand up for other people. But we can show our support and we can voice our support for those that are suffering or those that are being implicated right now, those that are being used as an example for further gain of those in charge, for further gain of those that consider themselves in a position of power and don't want to give that up. You can show support, you can act in a supportive way, you can make provisions for those that are suffering at this time. You don't have to be brave and stand up to the oppressors, although if that's in you, Libra, then do it. I'd be encouraging you to check the gate, check your safety. But if you feel the strength, if you feel Pallas Athena in your 11th house, if you think to yourself, I'm not going to stand for this. This is bullshit. This is not the truth. This is lies, and I know why. It's not for the purported social concern or safety of the children. It's for power and money and subjugation. In a system like this, there has to be people at the bottom, and the folks at the top know that all too well. So what do you think about that? Not too much, I'd imagine, Libra. It's not your bag. You choose the way that leads between the great two lines of force. So we're not talking about polarity. We're not talking about extreme this and extreme that, a fight to the death. No. Use your skills at this time, Libra. Use your humanitarian spirit, your incredible brain that sees the way that leads between those great two lines of force. Follow your own candle, but bring those along with you that need support, that need guidance, that need an encouraging word or a gesture of goodwill. Because it's tough out there. The biggest noise is coming from the smaller group. And the smaller group is the ones that are spinning out at this sort of evolution that we're all experiencing. And we can really recognize that. We know that things are going to change. We honor the entry of Pluto into Aquarius. The power to the people is rising. And that's triggering and spooky for folks that have never had to think about a lack of power or a loss of power, a loss of control. freaks them out. But you know that the only way that this group, this species, is going to continue is if there's a leveling out of that power. And if we can regard one another for our skills and talents and abilities and the beautiful individuality of everyone, but work together, then we'll get it over the line. So think about it, the full moon in the house of the goddess, house number 3. There are other definitions for it, but this is if we're going down the mythological track today with these readings, then it's the house of the goddess. Look to Pallas. Look to Pallas Athena. All right, let's get you some tarot. Ace of Swords in reverse. The Knight of Swords and the Two of Swords. Okay, a lot of swords. A lot of swords. And the Two of Swords is probably you, I'd say, in this one, Libra. Two of Swords is the first decan of the sign Libra. And in this, we're in a moment of stillness, non-reaction. There's a blindfold, but that's not to subjugate, and that's not a position of vulnerability, I would say, in this card. It's intentional stillness at this time. It's inaction for the right purpose. It's not for fear. It's not for... you shouldn't be ashamed if there has been this feeling of inaction, because it's coming to you. All of this mental work that you've been doing, this reticulation of what's the best strategy, how can I be of best use? I mean, what am I good for in this situation? Managing your triggers from the past too. Like, let's not forget what we're living through at the moment, what we're experiencing in the news and in the general vibe can be triggering to folks that have been in the face of oppression before. So this is intentional stillness, because one side of the thing has got it ass backwards. The Ace of Swords in reverse is lies. It's false. It is not the truth. On the other side of the Two of Swords, we have the Knight of Swords. So this is someone with a really direct message. This is someone with a voice. This is someone with speed in their intent and in their articulation. They know what to say, and what they're bringing with them holds a great deal of resonance as far as the actual truth of the matter. So look to this person for support, and then work off their example and move forward. In some ways, I would see this Knight of Swords could be Pallas Athena as well. So let's go back. So the 11th house, where we come into a sense of the community. That word gets thrown around so often these days. There's a community for this, a community for that, community for the other. There's nothing communal about these communities. I was listening to a really brilliant astrologer this week, and I cannot remember their name, and forgive me. They were talking about gender identity, and they were talking about the phrase that says, I identify as. I identify as. One thing that they brought up was like, it's also really important to recognize that folks that are talking about their gender identity are also identifying with this gender, this group of people. I identify with them. I see myself in them. You see, there's a lot of criticism right now about the evolution of language, the evolution of our consciousness as indeed welcoming in and recognizing the multitude of different presentations, different philosophies, different identities. And some of the criticism is it's very self-serving, it's very internal, it's very obsessive about oneself. I identify as I, me. That's an easy out. That's an easy argument for folks that have never had to think about it. If we can remember that the sentiment is indeed I identify with, that's communal. That opens up. That presents a band of people standing together. And for folks that are being identified with, there should be a welcome. There should be a celebration in some way. Numbers are growing. The dominant paradigm is dwindling. We know this. But what's going to take its place? Are we going to splinter off and separate ourselves? Talk about community through a screen or a lens, but never have anything to do with one another, not really identify with anyone? Or are we going to identify with each other? Are we going to see ourselves in other folks? Are we going to receive a bit of tender loving kindness from our community? That's the message for you, Libra. Less fiery. I think I might have to record the fire signs again. I'm not sure. We'll see. Much love to you, and Godspeed and good strength to you at this time, Libra. I'm proud of you, and I think that you know what needs to be done. So do it. If you're still here with me, please drop me a snake in the comments. You don't have to say anything, but I'm trying to outsmart the algorithm to get this work spinning around. So if you're still here, drop a snake. I'd love that. I can read your birth chart at umaruby.com, and I will remind you again that the Six of Pentacles stands for all of my work in perpetuity. If money is tight right now, I completely understand that, and I don't want you to miss out on an experience or a bit of storytelling because it's out of your price bracket. So Six of Pentacles is up there forever. Anyone can use it, no questions asked. I'll be with you in 2 weeks to talk about the new moon in Gemini, which will be great for us, and it will be a nice moment of, I really feel like healing after all of the Mars energy in Gemini that we're luckily getting over as the months go by. So until then, you take care. I'll speak to you soon. Bye, Libra. Hello, Aquarius rising. Welcome to your horoscope for the full moon in Sagittarius happening on June the 4th at 1:43 p.m. if you're in the southern hemisphere with me. So let's get stuck into it. The 11th house is where Sagittarius rests for you, Aquarius. And in the 11th, we consider the greater human species. Our thoughts about the human condition are enwrapped in the 11th house, and in Hellenistic astrology it was the house of good spirits, and I really like that, and I like that for you especially, because for somebody that is so preoccupied with community, with the greater experience, less to do with themselves, more to do with others, then to include the principle of good spirit in there is really beautiful. Community lifts us up. It has the capacity and will to do so. In a time when we are being criticized for self-identification, in a time when there is a lot of criticism about the growing and evolving language of personal identity, and one of those criticisms is that it's very inward facing and very selfish and hypersensitive and welcome to the real world, all of that rubbish. There's a great astrologer, and I can't remember their name. I need to look it up before I record the next one. However, they were in discussion about astrology and the trans experience, about gender diversity and gender identity. And the idea of saying I identify as is one thing. I identify as this gender, for example. What they said was, in essence, the individual is really saying, I identify with this group of people. I see myself in this group. So there's an olive branch there, and there's an invitation to feel kinship, feel witnessed and recognized and welcomed into the fold, to move together. That's one thing that I think is falling by the wayside when it comes to the criticism of our current age and the criticism of evolving language. It's like the individual is going to stamp out or stand on or get in the way of my identity. This is who I am. This is my experience. And it's like, in essence, for someone who is gender variant, the act of identifying with is a hope that they'll be accepted and received into their tribe, the folks that they see themselves in. That's just one thought straight off the bat, Aquarius, and it might not be in direct relationship to your experience, but I think it's really important to think about all of this stuff when we're considering a full moon in the 11th house. There's going to be a lot of emotion. There's going to be a lot of exhaustion, perhaps, in that space. When I look at the tarot for 13 degrees of Sagittarius, it's the 9 of Wands. So we can see that already. We can see that feeling of like, I actually don't know if I've got the stuff to engage in this anymore. It's actually too much. I am weak. I need support. I need guidance here. But one thing you need to remember when the 9 of Wands comes out in any reading is that they're still standing. Head bandage or not, they're not going anywhere. They're convinced, and they're going to go the distance. This is a great card when thinking about an Aquarius and their relationship with the 11th house. I imagine that this is you quite often, Aquarius. And so on that, I kind of want to dial back the intensity a bit and let you know that if things are feeling just a bit overwhelming right now, if there's, the news scroll that you're on at the moment is just a deluge of bad news, if you're really feeling the vitriol and experiencing its aggression, if it's damaging you, if it's traumatizing you, then you are welcome to take a step back. You can't solve this by yourself. You zoom out and out and out and out, you get stuck in that rafter, you feel separate from everyone, but you also feel incredibly responsible for their undoing. Well, if they don't sort it out for themselves, then if I don't do it, then no one will, is sometimes what can happen with an Aquarius. Your vulnerability is included in the list of important things to consider. Okay, so that's one thing to think about, Aquarius. The other thing to think about is that Pallas Athena, the asteroid that I was explaining in the intro, the one that was protecting Medusa, perhaps, the one that put on the mantle of the monster for Medusa, is in your 7th house. Leo is your 7th, your house of relationships. So is there someone that can provide you with some stability at the moment, at this present time? Is there someone in your life that you can think of that actually has the stuff, that is like geared up, ready to go, war paint on, ready to face it? Because at this moment, if you're not feeling it, you needn't have to consider that to be a failure, and you needn't have to consider that to be something to add to your pile of already intense things to think about and to move through. I like this relationship between the 7th and the 11th. It's really nice at this full moon, Aquarius. Perhaps there might be some room for you to set down some of these weapons or modes of protection. Perhaps there might be a little room for you to be a bit vulnerable with this moon. It's when we all do the best that we can not to let it drown us, don't we? When things stack up, when continual hatred is spewed forth, against folks that we love, that we would consider family. that we would consider ours to protect, when that's all being spewed out, and when you can see the ramifications of that, and you think back to yourself, you think back to the absorbency of your young one when you were small and how you believed everything that was said to you. I think about this, sorry to go back to me. I didn't realize the profundity of making this when I was 14, because it was protecting me and I didn't even know it. Isn't that beautiful? Medusa's steely gaze and snakes in her hair were protecting me at that time. And I learned something from her too. I've learned to put on my armor. This leather jacket I haven't worn in a long time. It even smells like the old days. It smells like how I used to talk and walk to protect myself walking home from a gig. It's shit that we have to do that. It's shit. So at this full moon, it might be a really nice time for you, Aquarius, to like expel some of that from yourself. You're allowed to cry in the company of the full moon, that's for sure. Especially at this one, Pallas Athena's got your back. She's helping you out in the best way that she knows how. It might not be the ideal way, but she's working with what she's got. I'm going to get you some tarot, I think, Aquarius. The Magician. The Nine of Wands. The Seven of Swords. All right. So we're talking to Sagittarius and we're talking to Aquarius here. So what's the story, Spirit? This is the moon. It's another version of the Nine of Wands. In this one, this character here is concerned about the swirling crows. There's danger afoot. There's an attack imminent. And they're sort of being dragged down by these barbed vines, you know. Still, I will say, you're not licked yet. You're not licked yet. And I think that when it comes to this idea of protection, this idea of who can I turn to, who can I where am I going to go if this is all falling to shit around me? Where am I going to go? I don't know where I'm going to go. Seven of Swords is Aquarian. It's the last decan of Aquarius. When we see the Seven of Swords, there's a worry about deception. There's a worry about like lies being told. And I'll always bring it back to the individual. It feels like trauma response to me. It feels like that moment when the brain snaps into fight or flight, fawn, freeze. You know, this smells like the past. This reminds me of when I was highly, highly, highly unsafe. The brain's like, yeah, it is unsafe, babe. You've got to go. Get out of here. And so the compulsion is to drop it and to run. But if you've got no fixed destination, that feels really, really scary and really desperate. What I want you to feel at the moment, Aquarius, is that in terms of rituals that you can enact, in terms of spells that you can cast, if that's a word that you'd like to use. You don't have to be full witch like I am. You don't have to be. But I think what I'm trying to get at is that in moments of such intense confrontation of the mind, it's called mindfulness. What we need to do is find a strategy to climb down from that ladder of terror when things get too much, when there's too much to be concerned about, when there is too many triggers there's too many scabs being picked off. The magician is here to ask me to tell you that you have access to ancient forms of meditation, and that the act of casting a ring of salt around yourself or at your doorway is a beautiful example of proactive mindfulness. Because in that ritual, we've got to clear our mind, right? And we ask the salt to keep danger at bay and to cleanse our soul. And in that concentration, we find that we've got room to breathe again. It's the same as any kind of magic, really, as far as I can see it. I mean, you're talking to an old showgirl, but I think that performing on the stage was an act of ritual magic. When you go to a club and you're in company with like-minded folks in community, in its best vibration of the term, and when you watch someone stand before you and use their body and their voice, they're creating a spell of protection too. They're saying, I'm like you. You are safe here, you are protected, and you are loved. So this is this is what I'm feeling, Aquarius. And you don't have to go out to the clubs and, it's not that, but it's kind of separating or crystallizing the essence of that act and likening it to stuff that you can do at home by yourself, with your tarot cards, with your astrology, with your relationship with the planets, with the moon. But I really feel that, this full moon in Sagittarius, it's going to be a really nice moment for you to voice your concerns to the moon about the human condition and to engage in active rituals of protection and of mental regulation. So we can stop some of those sharper barbs that have shown up in an attempt to protect us. In this moment, you are safe and you are warm and you are loved, Aquarius. And you're going to really enjoy investigating all of the different ways that you can remind yourself of that too. Salt, pack of playing cards. It's all you need. Take good care of yourself at this one. It's showing up for everyone. If you wanted to join me in ritual on the 4th of June, so that's Sunday here in Australia, I'll be starting the ritual at 1 o'clock and the moon will be at 1:43, and then I'll sort of gently wrap it up with a collective tarot spread after that. It's priced at $50, but as I said, the 6 of Pentacles is a discount code that is relevant for all of my work in perpetuity. So if money's tough, you just enter the 6 of Pentacles into the coupon code. Doesn't matter, no questions asked. If you want a reading with me, it works for that too. Take care, Aquarius. If you're still here with me, do drop a snake in the comments if you don't mind. I'm trying to win the algorithm, so you don't have to say anything, but just a little snake emoji would be awesome. Take good care of yourself, and I'll be with you in 2 weeks for the new moon in Gemini. So this will be a nice clearing. There'll be a lot of hope to receive at this one, and there might be some finer points for you to finer clues rather in the ways that you can express yourself that might be different from before. That's it. Bye. Hello Gemini rising, welcome to your horoscope for the Sagittarius full moon on Sunday the 4th of June at 1:43 p.m. if you're in the Southern Hemisphere with me. Now let's have a look to see where all of this goddess energy is happening for you at this time. I am feeling it for real. I'm not sure if I can use any of these horoscopes, but I am going to review them all. So we'll see what happens and what works and what doesn't. But I tell you what, I'm just going to keep going. For you, Gemini, Sagittarius rules your 7th house, which is your house of relationships, the folks that you let in, your nearest and your dearest. So if you want to think about a full moon in this house, it's going to be a really great time for you to release what is holding you back, what you need to let go of in terms of those dynamics, and also maybe feel like a sense of culmination too. Like, what kind of work have you been doing in intimacy? What kind of work have you been fostering and committed to as far as, sharing your life with somebody else or coming into close contact in an intimate way? It doesn't always have to be about romance as well, the 7th house. It can talk to our business partnerships, but it's definitely intimacy. I've heard it described as VIPs, so think about it that way. Pallas Athena is in your 3rd house of the goddess. The 3rd house has a lot of definitions. Can talk to neighborhood, local environment. It can talk to the way that we learn our communication styles, how we learn language, all of that kind of thing. And it's all absolutely true. In the ancient Greek, Hellenistic astrology, it was called the house of the goddess. So I really like this specifically if we're going to include Athena in this reading. So think about it in terms of Pallas Athena sitting in your house of the goddess, and she's bringing with her a message that will download for you at this full moon in regard to your relationships. I think that the mythology by Nikita Gill, the updated version of it, just speaks to such a beautiful principle of the ability for language to evolve and for myths, mythology, stories, fables to be passed from generation to generation through language. There's room to update the stuff. If we think about the mythology of Medusa's story, Medusa and Athena's relationship, it was always by the hand of a man. There was never any feminine perspective included in that translation until now. And so what I'm kind of just really drawn to is this idea of protection. There are folks in our lives, there's a proverbial sisterhood, and that space is inclusive of many different forms of gender as far as I can see it. Now, you may not agree with me, but if you don't agree with me, that doesn't make what I'm saying irrelevant. In my experience, the sisterhood includes folks of multiple variants of gender coming together and sharing support and love and warmth and tenderness and kindness for each other. Oftentimes, a sisterhood will be formed as a support circuit against some more domineering pressures. And so that mythology of Athena doing all that she could to protect her sister by turning her beauty into stone, by giving her snakes for hair, by putting the mantle of the monster on her back to protect her vulnerability. It's pretty powerful. And I don't want to linger too much over the sadness of that, but I don't know, it's a full moon in Sagittarius, and people have been saying some pretty shit things lately. So I think it's a really nice story to remember or re-remember, re-listen to. A lot of these mythological traditions found their way into the hands of folks that used them to oppress, that used them to stamp out individual expression or to control a larger populace. That was ultimately what they ended up being used for. There was a time when there were multiple deities to worship at for multiple different reasons, multiple goddesses that were helping and guiding us along. This is somehow what astrology is trying to get back to, is this idea of multiplicity in nature. And when everything is boiled down to a tradition that is all about power and oppression, this explains the resistance from the secular world. This explains that sort of feeling of like revolt against those systems that would have us oppressed. For you specifically, Gemini, I want you to sit with the goddess at this full moon in Sagittarius. I want you to think about your 7th house. I want you to think about your nearest and dearest, those that you would consider your closest allies, the ones that you love. And I want you to further listen to perhaps what Athena is trying to say or trying to let you know through your folk magic. I'm not sure how you ritualize a full moon, but if you create with your hands, perhaps it might be a really beautiful night to write to Athena. From Medusa's perspective or not, doesn't have to be. But you can let her know that you understand that she was doing her best to protect. It was an act of protection. Yeah. She willikins. It's funny, in this jacket, talk about mantle of the monster. I wore this thing for 15 years and I haven't worn it for the last 3. It changes my voice, it changes the way I walk. I wore it to protect myself. I used to be a showgirl, so getting off the bar and going home, I used to whack this thing on. No cab driver, no nothing would try me. It's, yeah. It's nice to come back to this space, to see what was going through my mind, how I was trying to protect something really vulnerable by turning it into a bit of a monster. Misguided, but still an act of love, I wonder if we can relate this to your 7th house. Can you look out to your 7th house and can you consider the behavior of those folks? At a full moon, we do want to release, we want to shed, we want to sort of, there's a lot of language around toxicity, isn't there? Toxicity in relationship, toxic person, oh, they're a narcissist, all of this kind of stuff. And it's really important for us to get a handle on sort of self-ownership and not owning other people's bad behavior. Absolutely so great to be able to release ourselves, give ourselves a sense of freedom from continual patterns of abuse. It's also really important to recognize that other folks have got their own shit going on too, and that hopefully they're doing their best to work through that shit and to grow and to evolve. So in your 3rd house, Pallas Athena, what is she telling you? What can you forgive her? And who else do you have the capacity to forgive? It's a fine line. And we're not victim blaming here by any means. We're also not cutting ourselves off with our snakes, with our leather jacket, with our stone gaze any longer. We almost want to step back and turn back the clock and take that spell off of us. Our vulnerability is our strength, Gemini. Our delicacy, our kindness, our sweetness. And there are still folks out there that would use that to their own ends. And that's what our mind is for. That's what our conversation is for too, isn't it, Gemini? Let's talk about it. This is a hard one. This is a hard one. My moon's in Gemini, so yeah, you're probably, yeah, don't cry. Okay. In esoteric astrology, which is one of the lines of interest that I'm studying at the moment, the jury's still out. There's lots of different philosophies out there, isn't there? And when it comes to folks that consider themselves to have had a spiritual awakening, there is a lot of shedding. And I'm coming back to that language of like dropping toxic behavior and toxic people and out of here, because I've done that in my life. And there's moments where I wonder to myself if I'm running because I'm scared of rejection again. In the esoteric philosophy, the glyph of Gemini, so think about it, it's that little like semicircle, and two lines. You'd think, oh yeah, two twins. And that's true. It's also an image of a mirror and light bouncing back and forth. We come into relationship with folks in our 7th house because we want to be witnessed. And we hold up our mirror so they can witness themselves in us. We learn them. We learn their behavior. We learn their needs and their wants and their desires and their vulnerability. And we hopefully show them that that's all right, that we see who they are. And we also hope that they'll have a mirror to hold up to us. And that's when the light and the love can be refracted and bounced back and forth and back and forth. There's a real sweetness and a real tenderness to Gemini when you consider it in those terms. Yes, you talk too much. Yes, you're constantly thinking and deciphering and gossiping, maybe. But you're doing it to try and figure out how best to love the other. That I know. I'm going to pull some cards. Got the 9 of Pentacles in reverse. The Knight of Cups. And the King of Cups. Yeah, I feel the lamentation here, Gemini. All of these cards have come out in reverse, so I'm going to go with that. The 9 of Pentacles talks about contentment with one's own company and one's own resources. There's a satisfaction at one's hard work and a feeling of real independence with the 9 of Pentacles. In reverse, there's a longing or there's a loneliness that's attached to that. The Knight of Cups is someone that's pretty direct with their emotions, that's pretty expressive, pretty articulate with how they feel, and they're bringing with them a direct message of love. In reverse, it comes off as something else. The emotion of love perhaps gets mixed or muddled up with another emotion. There's connection or intel that's coming out of the Knight of Cups in reverse, but it's muddied There's no direct intention here. And it feels that there's a motivation that's coming, as I said, from an emotion other than love. This is the page, not the king, I apologize. The page of cups is someone quite young and quite new to this. And they're in reverse too. I feel that there's something about kids in this reading. And there's something about, I don't want to be too specific with it, but it feels like there's like a relationship that's trying to be fostered with younger folks. And at the moment, they're saying some really shitty things. They're really getting sort of mouthy and confused and agitated by it. And you feel in some ways you've done the wrong thing, that you're not good at your position of authority, you know, that you're the one that is responsible and you don't know how to do that. You're not doing it well. If that's the case, Gemini, then I think I would use this full moon in Sagittarius to really allow the moon to guide your emotions a little bit, allow that articulation to come through you. I think you can write it down if you're worried about inadequacy or worried about your parenting style or worried about a chasm that you're feeling intimately or emotionally with people in your 7th house. And if there has been moments of pushing up against it or saying to yourself, I'm cutting off all of the toxic people in my life, this is toxic, but then feeling regretful of that, then maybe at this moon you can reconcile. Maybe the goddess in your 3rd house is saying to you, I'm doing the best I can, or I did the best I can. I don't always get it right. That's the reading. I hope I can keep it because time's running out. Much love to you, Gemini. Do take care at this Sagittarius full moon. It might be emotional from everything that we've just been through. If you'd like to join me in ritual on the day, if you don't wish to be alone at that moon, then do join the Sagittarius full moon ritual via my website. You can get your birth chart read there too, and that 6 of Pentacles is valid for all of my work. So that's a discount code that's in perpetuity. It applies to everything, no questions asked. So if that's what you'd like to do, I can read your birth chart. If you're still here with me, drop me a snake in the comments. You don't have to say anything, but just a snake would be really great. I'm trying to beat the algorithm. Much love to you, Gemini. Take care at this full moon in Sagittarius, and I'll speak to you in 2 weeks for the new moon in Gemini. So a new moon in your soul center. Until then, take care. Bye.